Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's Thursday. I'm out here at my yard taking class outside once again. And just wanted to check in with you. Probably the first of two end of module videos I'll do, a short one on Ezekiel Emanuel, Why I Want to Die at 75, just to talk about some of the good points you made in your discussion boards, which I was just responding to. So Zeke Emanuel is an interesting guy. His brother, Rahm Emanuel, was President Obama's chief of staff and then later mayor of Chicago. Emanuel himself is a renowned pediatric oncologist and also served on the National Institutes of Health and has been a very prominent physician and advocate for health in the United States. So their mother must be very proud. Their father, too, who you read about as well. So a couple things about Emanuel that I find interesting. And this argument, this article, which I've used before in class, at least one of you has taken, often provokes some interesting conversation. Dr. Ikowski in the history department, whom I team teach health and human rights with, really hates Emanuel's position. But I think it's interesting. And although I don't entirely agree with him, I think he does make some good points. And really the point that he makes, I think, is most relevant to us is that not all treatments are benign. And by that, I mean that any treatment that you get for any medical condition, and that includes getting a cast on a broken arm, taking Advil for a headache, they all have some downside, right? That's why I say they're not. I should say not completely benign, right? The Advil may upset your stomach. It may harm your liver. The cast will be uncomfortable, right? So in most cases where a curative treatment is called for, we just accept the downside because we want the thing to be fixed, right? So you take the Advil for the headache, you put a cast on your broken leg. However, in some cases, the treatment may be so not benign that you would question whether or not it's necessary to do that. And as a person becomes older, those problems become more and more serious because of the frailty of the person, and also because the sort of cascading effect of a series of medical interventions to deal with chronic conditions often leads to a series of significant problems that are the direct result of treatments a person is receiving. So someone who has congestive heart failure, as my father did, in the years before they die, their life could be very significantly restricted. They may have to be on a very strict diet. They may be short of breath a lot of the time. They're being kept alive by medications and treatments, but the condition in which they're being kept alive has a great deal of downside. And at this point, we're talking about delaying death, right? The question of whether or not to do treatment for someone who is of advanced age and who has chronic or even a terminal condition that's going to lead to death is very different from the question of whether to treat somebody who is at the beginning of life or even in the middle of life, right? A good example of this that I think I mentioned in the narrated PowerPoint, which you should take a look at, is CPR. I'm a young, relatively healthy 56-year-old man. If I had a heart attack, there would be no question right now that CPR should be performed on me. In 40 years, if I'm still alive and I'm 96 years old and I have a heart attack and I'm in a nursing home, CPR that's liable to break ribs and maybe even kill me may not be indicated, right? You may say that in that case, this is the thing that is going to take my life, and performing CPR would make the end of my life a horror show instead of a peaceful death. So one place where I've seen this depicted really well, if you happen to have a subscription to HBO Max, I guess is what they're calling it now, is on The Pit. We haven't seen the entire first season yet. I think we have the last 2 episodes to watch. My wife and I have been watching it, but I've seen on that show already 2 pretty good examples of dealing with treatment at the end of life. One was the case of a brother and sister whose elderly father was brought in from a nursing home in cardiac arrest. And the question was whether to intubate him and keep him intubated and keep him breathing on a respirator, or to let him die. Eventually they decide to do that, to let him die, and to sit with him while he dies. I think it's a very honest and affecting portrayal of some of those end-of-life decisions that have to be made. So, that's an example. Another example that's a little bit more stark is a young man who overdoses on that show, and his parents ultimately determined that he's going to be to respect his decision to be an organ donor, to allow him to be taken off the machines that are keeping him alive, and he's showing no blood flow to his brain, so he's dead. And the machines are keeping his life biologically functioning. That's a very extreme case, and again, you're talking about a young person there. But I think for the older person, they really do a nice job of dealing with some of those issues, right? To say, can we keep him alive? Sure, right? You could keep that respirator going. You could keep him alive for several more weeks. But in what state is he being kept alive? He can't communicate. He can't enjoy life in any sense, and we're only delaying death at this point. Putting someone on a respirator or ECMO until they can recover from something like COVID and return to a fulfilling life is one thing, but using those same instruments to extend life at the end of life under very painful and difficult circumstances may be something else entirely. And that's really what Emanuel is getting at in that article. He's not really saying that he doesn't want to live past 75, but he's saying if he does live past 75, he doesn't want to be in a condition where the medical interventions that are keeping him alive are making his life miserable. And so where I agree with him, I would say, is that when you reach a certain age, I'm 56 and I'm going to get there, sooner than you all. When you reach a certain age, I think it makes sense to be pretty skeptical about interventions and to ask, is this really necessary, right? Or even to ask, is this test necessary? I remember my mother telling me, she died in July of last year, but she told me and my sisters that she had stopped getting mammograms in the last couple of years of her life because they were really uncomfortable and because she had never had any, nothing had ever shown up on a mammogram, but she was basically saying, what interventions am I going to do if I come up with cancer when I'm 88, 89 years old? So, and she was a nurse, so she was pretty hard-headed about this stuff. So I would say that that's where Ezekiel is coming from. It is not saying I don't want to live past 75, but if I'm alive past 75, I want to be in a position to enjoy life as much as possible and not to be made miserable by interventions that are keeping me alive in a state where I really can enjoy life. And I think, although I wouldn't say I'd want to make a blanket statement that after 75 I'm not going to do anything, I would say when it came to curative treatments, especially those that might prolong my life with some deficits, I would ask some pretty hard questions about whether or not they're necessary. All right, it's a nice day to have a conversation about end-of-life issues. So enjoy this nice day and this nice weekend, and you'll probably see another one of these from me over the weekend.